Hello, I'm Michael Verney and welcome along to the Indo GAA Podcast with thanks to AIB. AIB is at the heart of Gaelic games across both club and county, and in 2025 they're celebrating a decade of sponsoring the All-Ireland Senior Football Championships. With this year's championship shaping up to be one of the most competitive in years, AIB is more excited than ever to bring fans closer to the action. Check out the hashtag #TheToughest for more. Hello and welcome to this week's Indo GAA Football Podcast, and what a week we have to look ahead to. All-Ireland final week on Sunday, Kerry versus Donegal. Delighted to be joined as usual by the usual suspects, Spillane and Dick Clerkin. Lads, how we doing?
We're very good.
Lads, just quickly, Dick, what do you think of when you think of All-Ireland final week?
Tickets. People annoying you for tickets.
It's absolutely madness this year, lads. There was I'd always get a lead on a couple for the hurling, zero, like not even a sniff, and it's the exact same for the football.
No, it's carried because it's carried on. The hurling, generally you'd hear nothing about the hurling up Airway, and for some reason this year it was chaos. All the Cork ones, and they done well by the looks of things, the colour in Croke Park. So yeah, it's always that way, but it seems more so this last year. You have two finals that we have two finals that are in huge demand, it just takes over. So that's a constant going up to matches. So people sort of think that you've got access to tickets. I don't know what to think. So yeah, tickets, and then you start to look forward to the game and sort of decide are you going to go or not and make your plans around it. So yeah, I don't know why you asked me that. That's because that's the one thing that's come up over the last even conversations there this morning down in Tipperary, of all places. Would you believe the home of hurling and the sun is shining? First conversation, somebody asked me, have you any tickets taken? I'm like, nope. I used to lay and let on that I could get them, son, but no, I'm not. No empty promises this week.
Pat, what do you think of when you think of All Ireland final week? You obviously played in a load of them. I'm sure it was, and like, is there always, you can associate so well with what players are going through in this week. It's a mad week for players.
It is, yeah. I was privileged to have played in 13 All-Ireland finals. I played in 10 senior finals. I played in 2 under-21 finals, and I played in an All-Ireland club final.
All right. Don't rub it in, Pat.
So I presume that the time on the podcast this morning will be devoted according to fella's experience.
Hey, Pat, it usually is. It usually is.
So Dick can go now, I suppose, can he? All-Ireland finals, and I think I said it last week, or I certainly said in an article, I lost 2 finals, I lost 2 semi-finals, but I found losing the 2 semi-finals was worse, because there's something very special about an All-Ireland final, particularly the week of it, excitement, the build-up, the atmosphere, the colour, the flags everywhere. And All-Ireland final day is a very, like, it's the most special day in the calendar of a GAA player. And I think I said that to you last week, or I said it to somebody talking about running out on the pitch before in Croke Park the day of an All-Ireland final. And like I said, it's the most amazing feeling. It's that cacophony of sound and colour. And it's like, I swear to God, I mean, it's like you're on a magic carpet ride. You're taken to an out-of-body experience, a most special place. And All-Ireland finals are amazing places. And we've seen it last Sunday, you can surf that tide and wave of emotion and colour and atmosphere, and Tipperary surfed that wave last Sunday in the second half. But you can drown in a sea of expectation and anxiety. And I was lucky that most of the time, I embraced the atmosphere. I loved the atmosphere. I swallowed up and the louder, the more colour, the more I embraced it. And, just getting back to the hurling and like, obviously, I'm not a hurling expert, but I couldn't but help look at Cork in the second half and just think of my own experience in 1982 and something similar. With 20 minutes to go against Offaly in 1982, we were 4 points up. The finish line was in sight. We were going to win 5 in a row, greatest team of all time, immortality. But we forgot that there was 20 minutes to go, and we retreated into a shell of negativity and safety first and protecting our lead. And instead of protecting our lead, that fear, it invited Offaly onto us, and Offaly won it, and the scoreboard doesn't lie. And it was a bit like that last Sunday in the second half. The minute Pat Horgan missed that free straight after half time, and then there was another mistake or two, and tips in blood, they smelt blood. And they went after Cork, and the longer that game went on, I'm sure Cork at half-time, if they went in 3 points, maybe they'd have been on their toes. Going in 6 points certain players would have been looking at that finish line, would have been thinking of the 20-year famine.
And you can't think it. Once that seeps in, Pat, you're goosed, aren't you?
I swear to God, right, okay, these Cork players, none of these Cork players had an All-Ireland medal in their pocket. So you can get that the anxiety got to them and they just had a mental meltdown. I mean, in Kerry's case, all of us had 5 All-Ireland medals in our pocket. We were experienced guys. We'd been there, done that. We weren't in any way affected by the outside noise, by the colour, by the achievement possibly of winning 5 in a row. But with 20 minutes to go, there was some switch went on subconsciously in all of us, and fear permeated. And like I said, sport is brilliant. I mean, sport is amazing. There's so many highs and lows, so many tears and so many cheers, so many periods of happiness and disappointment. And like at 3:30 last Sunday, it looked like Pat Horgan was going to get that long-awaited All-Ireland senior medal. And now it looks like the highest scorer in Championship hurling won't have an All-Ireland medal. Do you know, at 3:30 last Sunday, Liam Cahill and his men were rank outsiders. At 5 o'clock, do you know, you have heroes at 3:30 who are villains at 5 o'clock. And it'll be no different, like you said, for next Sunday, because either Jack O'Connor or Jim McGuinness, one of them will be the Messiah next Sunday, but the second person won't. Michael Murphy and David Clifford are 2 of the greatest players of the modern era. One of them at 5 o'clock will still have only 1 All-Ireland medal in their pocket. So 70 minutes ahead that can transform their life. But I loved All-Ireland finals. That's the part. I embraced them. I loved them. I surfed that wave of emotion. But like I said, you just don't know how players will react, because in that pressure cooker, it's a pressure in an All-Ireland final, and when the pressure is on, it's a pressure no player will have ever experienced in their life, in a Munster final or in a National League final or in a club county final, and you don't know how players will react until they're in that red hot heated battle.
Dick, I don't want to open a load of scars here, but I presume the fact that you never played in one still rankles with you. And even Milan always talks about playing in one and they got obliterated in it. But to me, getting there and playing in one and being involved in the anticipation and the build, like, lads, half the thing about sport is the anticipation of it and the build up of it and the buzz of it. If the day goes wrong, the day goes wrong. But I presume, Dick, you'd give anything to have played in at least one throughout your career.
It goes without saying, Mike, probably as a player, there were 2 or 3 seasons that genuinely we could have made one. You know, that you were both good enough on your day, and maybe the teams that were beating you or getting there ahead of you were within sight. You know, there's plenty of seasons you just weren't at the races, and it had been, you know, blind hope, and just maybe a bit of luck, you know, especially I think back to 2007, Pat, when we led that great Kerry team. We were 2 points up with 5 minutes to go, and Tomas O'Shea sort of pulled up his socks and dragged that Kerry team over the line, and they went on and comfortably won the All-Ireland that year. And that one always sort of rankles. And if Monaghan had a good over the line, got to a final, might have been a stretch to win one, but I think you have to sort of maybe get to one, lose one, and build that confidence experience. That always sort of, because we've lost semi-finals since that, and I think that those couple of near misses sort of has kept that glass ceiling a bit sort of in Monaghan's way over the last number of years, where by comparison Donegal broke through that and have thrived. So yeah, so not experience it as a son first. My dad had similar sort of near misses when they fell short of Pat's great Kerry team in 85, and then as a player, and since as a supporter. Yes, but I'm optimistic. I sort of say Monaghan just have to keep going, keep them, and the other Monaghans of this world have to keep going. And I always maintain, if you're good enough for long enough, the opportunities will fall. But you know, in terms, you asked me at the start, you know, my experiences, I sort of would have experienced obviously All-Ireland finals differently to the Pats of this world. You're there as a sort of a neutral supporter, and I used to always be blown away by the different crowds and the different atmospheres and what typically Ulster teams would bring to Dublin and Jones's Road by comparison to Kerry. Generally, it's just the Kerry ones going to the game turn up. Whereas I remember going, geez, when Tyrone got there in 03 and 05, like the half of Tyrone were lined on outside Quinn's, and they'd be there because half of them didn't have tickets. I'll never forget the biggest crowd I ever experienced, and you might have remember too, was Donegal and Mayo in 2013. Like, it just felt like the world and its mother. Was
12, yeah.
2012. Unbelievable atmosphere. And then it makes me think, well, what are those counties like in the build-up, and how does that impact the players? And you used to always say, you'd hear stuff after the Mayo games when they lost finals that, you know, they let the build-up get away from them. They didn't manage the hype and the euphoria. That has to be a massive thing within the county. How that's managed, how do you not insulate the players from it, but like Pat said, how do you allow the players not to enjoy it? Because you'd imagine it's an experience that has to be enjoyed, but not be overwhelming to the point that it impacts your performance. And as much as the fitness training, the tactical and all the stuff that managers have to do, I'm sure that's a massive job for the respective managers in the lead up to an All-Ireland final, to allow them to enjoy it, embrace it, rise to the occasion that Pat spoke about, but not let it suffocate you, that it looks like, unfortunately for Cork, it did, and has done for an awful lot of other counties over the years.
Yeah.
But you know, just lads, I mean, I was lucky. Like, I was privileged and very, very lucky. I happened to come along playing in a county with a huge footballing tradition, but I happened to come along at a time when an exceptional bunch of players all came along at the same time. And on top of that, we had Mick Dwyer, the greatest manager of all time, come along as well. So all the ducks were in a row. So look, while I've been privileged to play in so many All-Ireland finals, I also know I was damn lucky. And you know, you talk about the build-up to finals and whatever like that, and it's something Mick used to always talk about. Not about Kerry, but the year he was in charge of Kildare and they got to the final, and he said, the only regret he has now that he didn't do things differently, because he said when they were in training, it was great. They were closeted from the outside noise. He had them focused. He had them in the zone. But he said when they went home to their localities, to their clubs, things were gone bananas. And he regretted, he always said, would I have been better off to take them away for a week, 10 days before the All-Ireland final, out of Kildare to somewhere nice and quiet that they could build up for the final. And I'd say if he got a second chance with Kildare, that's what he would have done. And like I said, do you know, like how you react. It was interesting, you know, because somebody asked me last night, what do you think of Cork's players not wanting to do a parade or a homecoming last night? And there's no wrong or right answer, you know, but I can honestly say that I always remember the 1982 final, and John Egan was captain, and I think I said it to you last week or so, a couple of weeks ago. John Egan was captain. It was going to be the greatest night ever in the history of the village of Sneem. The pubs had ordered in thousands of barrels of Guinness. This was going to be the biggest party of all time. And anyway, obviously, of course, we lost. But I can still, to this day, and that's 43 years ago, is it 43 years ago, something like that? 43 years ago. I can still remember vividly on the Monday night in the pouring rain, standing, maybe it was Tuesday night, Tuesday night in the pouring rain, standing on a lorry outside Dan Murphy's bar in the South Square in Seam. A couple of hundred people braving the rain. And, you know, we wish the ground would swallow us up. And I don't know, like obviously the players didn't want to be there. I don't think the people want to be there. And I know people are very good and they want to show support. But my feeling is, especially from a Cork point of view, when they just didn't turn up last Sunday, that I think just they need space. They need time and space to recover mentally from that scarring. And I think while it's all good, very laudable to honour, Jesus, it's just, I'll never forget it. I swear to God, to this day, I'll never forget it. It was the lowest point in my footballing career. That just, I can still look out over the couple of hundred people, and it will be lashing rain and cold, and you know, pretending everything is fine out and we'll be there back next year. We weren't back for a couple of years, but tough. I would agree.
And the fact that they lost last year to go and have the same again, I guess, yes, you can understand how to just, you have to empathise them a wee bit with them on that. And I'm sure there's a few people throwing a few barbs that should have turned up, but listen, these are amateurs. That has to be a very lonely place that they are. And knowing Cork people, not too many might have showed up either. And it's sort of said, listen, and maybe that's what they maybe need to push them back harder for next year. But yeah, I would be going easy.
Yeah, I think I think from the mental point of view, I think it was a good decision. I think these lads need time and space to recover. And like I said, no better crowd than Cork. When they start winning again, they'll be back on the wagon. That's it.
The big question, lads, is who's going to have the happy homecoming next Monday? And I just throw this to you, Pat, real quick. Does the 2014 final have any bearing? Not bearing on this game per se, but that was McGuinness's last game as Donegal manager, first time around. They'd beaten Dublin in the All-Ireland semi-final. I think they were favourites, narrow favourites going into that game. He talked about how he had planned for Dublin for a year. It was probably a misstep of a kick out from Paul Durkin ended up in Kerry and Donegal's hands. The ball goes into the back of net. Donegal could have got something at the end of the game. Like, I don't think it's too simplistic to say that McGuinness has been planning to play Kerry for the last 11 years and this is his opportunity, and in an All-Ireland final of all places.
Well, as you can see, I choose this colour today because to get it out of the way, because this is the colour the priests wear for funerals. So I get my mourning colour this week, and hopefully a bright celebratory colour. I don't think, there's no doubt about it. I know counties, I mean, they say the cherry on the cake, the icing on the cake is to beat Kerry in an All-Ireland final because Kerry are the kingpins. So there's no doubt about it. Jimmy McGuinness will certainly it would be a huge feather in his cap to beat Kerry. I'm not too sure do past matches, because we talked recently about 2012 with Kerry, and we talked about the dangers of 2012 when Kerry over-celebrated beating Tyrone in 2012 and were beaten by Donegal in the next round. We talked about 2014 where Donegal beat Dublin and yet collapsed in the final against Kerry. I don't think that final will have any great bearing. There's no doubt about it. It was a poor final. Yeah. Kerry fell over the line. If Colin McFadden's shot hadn't hit the post, it would probably have gone to replay.
You know what I love, Pat, about 2014 is the fact that somehow you get away with playing the most negative football that's ever been played in Kerry's history.
Well, actually, that's a misconception, and that's something that's peddled for years.
Go for it. Go for it.
All that happened was that Kerry decided that day, if you can remember, against when Dublin got caught by Donegal, they got caught on the break, they got caught over the top, and there was acres of space, the flick-ons and no one back in the bins. And Kerry, hey presto, for the All-Ireland final, they decided, guess what? We'll leave the 6 defenders back in their position. They're not to go forward. 6 defenders, stay in your positions. And by the way, if the ball comes up the left side, drift over slightly. If the ball goes up the right, there was nothing rocket science. There was nothing defensive. Just the 6 defenders stayed defending, and they never went forward. And unfortunately, in Donegal's transition game, Donegal's running game, they ran in, instead of the acres of space that they had against Dublin, they ran into a roadblock because Kerry defenders were in situ. That was it. Nothing defensive, just it was called common sense.
Something you have a lot of. Dick, McGuinness, obviously, probably few would have even predicted that he would have been back in the Donegal, hot seat for a second term. This is a real contrast of styles in the final. You're looking at a kicking team in Croke Park and you're looking at a carrying team in Croke Park, and it's going to be fascinating, Dick, to see the trade-off, the comparisons even. Can Donegal beat Kerry playing that way? Can Kerry beat Donegal playing that kicking game? It's going to be so interesting to see.
Well, just going back to Pat talked about the last time they met, so I'll give a bit of an exclusive that I've never mentioned here. I know for a fact, I'm not going to disclose who was in conversation, that prior to that final, Kerry management and players reached out to Monaghan for a bit of advice on how to beat Donegal, because we were one of the few teams that had actually beat them. We beat them in the 2013 Ulster final comprehensively, and were sort of seen as a team that sort of had figured them out. And it was a case of, what did you look at? What did you do well? And a couple of things that were identified where, as Pat said, keep your shape. Don't get sucked down the pitch. Donegal, and still do, like to exploit space and counter-attack into it. So if you give them that space, you're playing into their hands. So go back to that final, they held their shape. And back then they didn't have really good range kickers, so they sort of let them off, knowing that if you didn't give them space in behind, they probably weren't going to do damage from distance. So that was one of the other one then was very much around a disciplined man-to-man marker on their key man. Back then was Michael Murphy. Okay, if you remember, and I've talked about it before, and it still stands up there with anyone. One of the best defensive displays from a player on player was Vinnie Corey held Michael Murphy scores from play for 3 consecutive Ulster finals. An amazing feat. If a Kerry player done that in 3 games against Michael Murphy, he'd be hailed up there with all the greats. And they took that template. If you remember, Aidan O'Mahony was given that job in the final. Never probably kicked the ball himself, but was willing to sacrifice his own game for the betterment of the team, and it worked because Murphy, barely touched leather in that game. The other one then was around James O'Donoghue. If you remember, James O'Donoghue was Footballer of the Year that year.
He played a different role completely in the final.
He was advised to play a different role insofar as if he was left inside, he could expect to get suffocated, get no ball, and could be a sort of the game could pass him by. And he was said, bring him out the pitch. Let him get on the ball, bring out the pitch, play a different role, because that's not what Donegal would be expecting. And those 3 things alone were massively pivotal in the game. Yes, they got the breaks. Yes, they got the sort of the fortunate kick out dropping to Donoghue, but they got the game on their terms, not Donegal's. And it wasn't pretty, didn't matter. It was all about winning the result. And I think you'll see a wee bit more difficult now to do that, which the way the game has got that bit more chaotic. But I think you'll find if Jack O'Connor and Kerry are smart, they'll look and see, well, where do Donegal try to bring you and not allow them to do that? Don't allow you to play the game on Donegal's terms, because that's when Monaghan were able to beat Donegal, we didn't do that. We didn't play it on Donegal's terms. And it mightn't always been the most prettiest spectacle. Like the times we beat Donegal, they weren't pretty good games, but you beat them. And if you get into a sort of a gunfight and a shootout, I think Kerry will lose, because the endurance and the fitness that Donegal have and the strength and depth could see them over the line. Now, it might be a point or two. I think Kerry need to try and keep this game as tight and as sort of stagnant as possible and frustrate the counter-attacking running game of Donegal if they can. But again, that I remember distinctly back then that watching Kerry play that day, I says, you took on board what you were advised to do, and it worked. So it'll be interesting if they've done the same somewhere else. Actually,
it's interesting because that phrase that we hear so often now about hammering the hammer, and Kerry keeping their defensive shape that day. And it was well known, obviously, all of Donegal's scoring threat pretty much came from McFadden, Murphy and McBrearty. The 3, they were the shooters inside in the full forward line. Between the 3 of them that day, McFadden got no point from play, McBrearty got 2 points from play, and Michael Murphy got 1 point from play. So they did hammer the hammer. But you mentioned a very interesting couple of words there, and that's the key. On their terms. If Kerry are going to win next Sunday, they're going to have to play the game on their terms. Now, what are their terms? Kerry need to operate the kicking game. They need to create the space, and they need to get first-time ball in. That's number 1, on their terms. They need to nullify, like in 2004, the threat of Michael Murphy, playing on their terms, not Michael Murphy's terms. But it goes back to what Dick alluded to, and the strength. Like, we look at the greatness of Donegal this year, and it's no different than 12, 13 or 14. That hard running in transition, that hard running. They're unbelievably fit, unbelievably well conditioned. So, when Morgan, when Owen Bond, when McHugh, when they're driving forward, that's when they're at the best. So, how do you're allowing them play on their terms when they're in transition, hard running forward. right. How do you play on your terms? You put them on the back foot. You force them to defend. Easier said than done, but if Kerry can play on their terms, forcing them to defend, putting Monaghan, putting McHugh, putting these boys on the back foot, maybe man-marking McHugh, who's a vital in that transition play. It's a lot of ifs and buts and maybes. What I'm also intrigued about is what will Jimmy come up with? Because we know Jimmy is probably the most innovative coach in Gaelic football. He certainly changed the landscape of Gaelic football when he came on the scene. I'm looking at two things. First of all, I'm looking at he's not going to be like Malachy or O'Rourke for the Tyrone game, who didn't seem to really have any plan for David Clifford. They pretty much win man to man in Tyrone's defence, and David destroyed them. So will he look at Liam Call's template from last Sunday? And Liam Call was constantly quoted in the build-up to saying, we don't use sweepers, we don't play sweepers in Tipperary, we don't have a sweeper. And guess what? They turned up with a sweeper, Brian O'Mara, in front of the Tipperary, or in front of the Cork full forward line. They crowd out the Cork full forward line, they close out the supply to the Cork full forward line, and it was a masterclass in a defensive play by. So I'm sure there will be a plan for David Clifford to curtail David Clifford. And it's not that Shawnee, O'Shea and possibly Paul Ganey, they can score, but when a man is contributing 35% of the scores in this year's championship as David Clifford, he's the key man. So there's going to be, I'll be interested to see, will he have a +1? What will he have to do? I'll be intrigued. But I think he could also, I really do believe he's going to pull a rabbit from the hat and perhaps do something differently the next day. And I have a slight feeling that could revolve around Michael Murphy, because Michael Murphy up to now, majority of his main role has been as a link there in the middle third of the field. He's linking the play. And I just think that maybe Donegal might revert to more of a kicking game and transition next week. And if they do, I think they could easily put Michael Murphy on the edge of the square and target him with high ball, because Kerry are most definitely vulnerable under the high ball. So
I agree and I disagree with you, Pat. I think one of McGuinness's traits of his teams when they 1-12 and why they're good this year is their consistency of doing simple things and doing it well for long enough that just wears teams down. They almost purposely don't try to vary things too much, because it then distracts them from maybe doing what they do well. I do agree, though, that they might try on occasion. Now, it might be once or twice. Think back to the 12 final.
Yeah, I watched that back the opening minutes as well. A ball comes into Murphy in the first minute and went past him, though, and went wide. And then the next ball comes into him from Carl Lacey. And it's totally a set play, yeah.
A set play. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that. Are they going to have that as an attacking strategy for 70 minutes? No. I don't think so. And I think Kerry would have to be wise to that. Don't let somebody get exposed or get isolated. So you could certainly see something like that. But I don't think they're going to change a whole pile. They will just have to sort of trust themselves and sort of say, listen, at the end of the day, boys, we know we're fit. The only reason that Kerry will beat us if we don't actually play at our full capacity, because then that advantage we have is irrelevant. So if Donegal don't work hard, and if you look at the games that they have not struggled in, but haven't been at their best, the first half against Louth, the first half against Monaghan, they weren't playing at that high pitches. That advantage that they have over their opponents was irrelevant because they weren't working, they weren't running hard enough. But when they stepped it up, teams couldn't live with them.
Yeah.
So he will just be maintaining as this. If we don't, whatever but anything else, if we're not running hard off the ball and with the ball, we're not an average team, but we're back against the pack. So it'll be work rate. It'll be getting back into position, hard running to get their defensive shape. And then when they have the ball, it'll be just hard running. And I'm not saying, when I say hard run, I should coach the kids like that again. When you're running, run hard, because if your man beside you hasn't got that fitness or isn't tuned in, you're going to burn him. You're going to get away from him. You're going to get separation. You're going to get that 5 yards ahead, which makes a difference when you get up the pitch. So that'll be it. Be focused on backing themselves, trusting themselves that you have the work done, you have the fitness over Kerry, but it's no good unless you actually deploy it.
But like you take the Kerry point of view, and you now have Graham O'Sullivan playing as a wing forward. You possibly for spells next week will have Joe O'Connor playing as wing forward. What they're damn good at is they're athletes.
Yeah.
They're powerful box-to-box runners. They're direct runners. And I'll tell you this, they would be a nightmare for the likes of McHugh and Morgan and them. And if Kerry can Kerry match them in fitness and work rate? That's the key question, because that's what they must do. But I've been impressed by Kerry's work rate and fitness this year. And I looked at the match against Tyrone. 110 out of 120 from turnovers. That was an impressive stat. You don't normally associate stats like that with Kerry. So if they can match the work rate, tractor runners, yeah, absolutely. But it's like I said, I think this is the hardest. It's the hardest final for many years. The only thing certain we can know is it'll be a better final than last year. That won't be difficult. There'll be no seagull on the pitch in Croke Park for 60 minutes. That's a certainty. The scoring will be much higher. At half-time last year, it was 6-all. At the end of the game last year, it was 111 to 13 points. It'll probably be that at half-time or even more. And the final stat, which will definitely be, if we can remember in last year's final, the 6 full forwards scored the grand total of 1 point from play between them. The full forward line this year will be contributing a lot more than 1 point from play. They're the definites, I know.
Yeah. Just something, Pat, I want to pick up on there. And it's I might have mentioned this last week, and it's not something that's maybe always associated with Kerry because of how they play and their lovely kick passing and that. Kerry are phenomenally fit this year.
Yeah.
But like it's clearly something. I'm not saying they haven't gone after it before, but they are phenomenally fit, because I'd say it was a fair idea that Jack O'Connor realised that they were going to come up against this machine.
I can tell you this,
stage.
Michael, you're spot on, because I meet Johnny O'Shea on a regular basis. I meet my nephew Killian on a regular basis. I meet Tide Morley, and I know this year they're fitter, but they're stronger. They're fitter, they're leaner, but they're stronger. If that makes sense, there's no doubt about that. They're a different animal this year. It's something that Jason McGuinness, the strength and condition coach, he was criticised heavily last year and over the last couple of years that Kerry, towards the end of the games, had been physically found wanting. That is not the case thus far this year. But the litmus test comes between 3:30 and 5 o'clock next Sunday.
Yeah, and you can see that. I know we talk all about Clifford scoring and his finishing and his assists, but I noticed from day one when he came back in a Kerry jersey this year, he was leaner and he was fitter. And you can see how he's benefiting. And that how does that play out in the pitch? That maybe that half yard that he gets ahead of his man, and for a player like David Cliff, that half yard he wasn't getting against Armagh last year. He just couldn't get that bit of separation, or the lungs were going on him just to make that extra run. Whereas this year, that half yard is enough to get him by Pádraig Hampsey for that goal, for instance. Just a bit of power, the bit of pace to get by, and no player more than him is benefiting from that fitness that Kerry, Pat rightly says Kerry has this year.
Just something there, Pat, I wanted to just go into a little bit more detail on. You mentioned about maybe them playing somebody back in front of Clifford, maybe. McCall, it's expected, will pick up Clifford. Excuse me. It's going to be fascinating to see what they do to deny the ball going in, number one. Because if he gets the ball, you're in trouble. But do you expect something like... They did it with Dublin in 2014. They did it with Monaghan, I would say, in the quarter-final. They did it with Meath in the semi-final as well. Do you expect them to encourage or allow Kerry to shoot from outside, but other Kerry players to shoot from outside, and make them beat you that way in some respects?
So how do you stop a player like David Clifford? Well, obviously, if you can curtail the supply into him, that's the priority. That's number one. Secondly, a bit like the Tipperary defence last week, you crowd them out. You crowd out the full forward line. You block the space. That's number two. And number three, if he does win possession, well, where do you want David to be shooting from? You don't want David to be coming around on the loop onto that favourite left foot and hook it over the bar. So you're going to have to get him into positions and into areas where there's more of a high-risk shot. And what does that mean? That means take him onto his right foot. David is not as accurate on his right foot. Take him into areas of the field onto that right foot, into the right corner of the field, sticking onto that right foot. So, like, can David be curtailed? He can, but it's the $1 million question. And I don't know. It's just, like I said, it's just so wonderfully tied up. I know you'll be often accused of being a cute Kerry whore and sitting on the fence. This is really, I swear to God, I think this is the hardest. And a lot will depend on little things, because you'll pretty much know what the Donegal team is. Now, the Kerry team that will take the field next week, it's going to be a gamble, right? It's definitely going to be a gamble, because from what I hear now, irrespective of what the team is selected, but from what I hear, Diarmuid O'Connor is training fully. Paul Gainey is training fully. So, right, do you start with Paul Gainey and Diarmuid O'Connor, or do you bring them on? Do you risk? They started Diarmuid O'Connor down in Killarney after a couple of weeks off, and he got injured in the first minute. So it's a big risk. What's the first 15? What are your starting 15? And do I risk injured players? And will I get 17 minutes out of them? That is probably the biggest question that's facing Jack and his selectors this week. But like, just unsung heroes, do you know, like we talked about the new rules suit Kerry football, and it suits heads up kicking football. But the new rules suit the Donegal and Kerry halfbacks, because they have powerful runners from deep. And this year, Gavin White has been brilliant this year. Brino Bugley is brilliant, driving forward, because they're coming out of the defence and there's open spaces between them. And like their defence, and we always say about their defence, with Paddy Tally gone and that blanket defensive system that he had set up with Tyg Morley as a sweeper, we said, well, they might be vulnerable. But you know what, the stats so far, they haven't been taken. Like, yes, for the first 20 minutes against Tyrone, when Tyrone ran directly at them, it looked like they were going to be constantly opened up. Cork created a lot of goal-scoring chances in both games. But when you look at the stats through league and championship, Kerry's defence, and a much maligned defence, Kerry's defence have only conceded 11 goals in 16 league and championship games. In 8 league games, they conceded. In 4 of the 8 league games, they conceded no goal. In 4 of the 8 championship games, they've conceded no goal. So maybe they've been impressive. And what I like, as I alluded earlier on, their scramble defence, their work rate, their tackling, their turnovers, they're good at it.
They're good at, I noticed, especially in that second, third quarter against Tyrone, because I was sitting that side of the pitch in the Davin side, and we talked about it a couple of weeks ago when Tyrone looked like they had got on top around the midfield with Kilpatrick. They were coming forward, but on 2 or 3 occasions, Kerry were very, very disciplined in that sort of D arc, the old arc, if you want to call it that. And I expect them to not flood that area, because lots of average teams just throw bodies in and flood that area. But when they get teams in that sort of snare area, they look for the turnover there, which takes a huge level of discipline to allow a team to come in that far, not foul, and not sort of half tackle that allows the player to get a shot off uncontested. So they've done that quite well throughout. So it looks like it's obviously a tactic and something that they train for. It's not just something that they sort of react to in it. Where by comparison, Donegal typically are quite comfortable pushing out that bit further. They like to attack outside the arc, like they did against Monaghan in the second half, like they did against Meath. Identify a team that want to kick 2-pointers and don't give them that opportunity. Now, Donegal are quite happy to sort of allow times in. So it'll be interesting, in the first sort of 10-15 minutes where the respective teams are engaging their attack. Do they want to tackle further up the pitch, or are they quite happy to let them come in, try to get them sort of turned over in that sort of higher risk area and hit them on the counter? Because that will sort of set the tone of the game. If you find both teams retracting, trying to flood that D, it mightn't just be the shootout that, Pat, you're talking about. It might be a wee bit turgid, and I wouldn't be surprised, because that is a sort of a danger for both teams. But it'll be interesting to see. Kerry have done it very well, and it's a testament to their defenders, even with the likes of Morley and Tom O'Sullivan and boys that had to step in that haven't maybe got the credentials that the boys will replace. And so that'll be a big thing. And I think Kerry won't, because Donegal don't typically shoot from outside the arc. They like to get her to get in. If you look at their high percentage scoring, it's in that old dark area. So Donegal will sort of say, right, hammer the hammer. We're going to try and high pressure in that area that Donegal want to kick from. Push them. And if they have to push them, Donegal to kick from outside the arc, well, that's pushing them to somewhere they do want to be. And that's a good place for Kerry and not a good place for Donegal.
You know what's one, like, because the teams are so evenly matched, and we talk about the phrase from Paddy again, that grain of rice, and both managers will be looking at that grain of rice. But what was particularly impressive, and we talked about the David Cliffords and the Shawnee Sheas and the two-pointers and all the goals they scored early, even though the goals have dried up in recent matches, and their good defending play, and the influence of Joe O'Connor around the middle. What has been very, very impressive about them in the last two matches, they played against you. We talk about the importance of kickouts now.
Yeah.
Vital importance of winning the kickout. The three best kickout exponents in the game are Ethan Rafferty, Niall Morgan, and Sean Patton. Right. We know how they dealt with the press on Ethan Rafferty's kickout, particularly in that 15-minute spell in the second half. They went at Rafferty's kickout, and he suffered a meltdown. They did the very same against Morgan's kickouts in the second half against Tyrone, and Tyrone had a meltdown. And if you can remember, when in the first half, particularly against Monaghan went at Patton's kickouts, Patton had a meltdown. And even
in the first half, the last day, Pat, there was,
they struggled. So it will be very interesting if Kerry are as effective with their kick-out press against Patton as they were against the other two lads. Well, that means one main plank in Donegal's attacking, that long, quick exocet kick-out, radar-like kick-out, is gone. So that's another grain of sand.
Just on that, Dick, as well, maybe it's selective memory, but I can't recall in recent games Donegal going short very often at all. I don't know if that's to avoid the possibility of a quick turnover ending up in a goal, but they seem to be happier to go to either sideline, and if the ball goes out, it goes out. But as Pat says there, Kerry will go after Patton, and they will see chinks of light definitely in the last couple of games. I think they went in four in the front line, four in even in the midfield line as well. Like really, really aggressive stuff, and that's going to be fascinating for a man who was far more Lorna Parker for so long. Like the emphasis on the kick out and the emphasis on the midfield. Like whoever gets the strong hand there will more than likely win on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think Kerry, okay, one of the things with the midfield that I've sort of looked at over the last, it's as I said this before, it's gone back to more when I played. Even they might sit back and say the team that won or the dominated midfield. Actually, when you look at the stats, it might be like 55, 45, or even there's very few games that there's this huge big gap of, say, 70-30. Those numbers don't really exist. But what you find is that, especially from playing against Donegal, like if I'm Jack O'Connor saying, so how do we beat Donegal? I say, so look, there's a couple of things. If they've got the ball, whatever bit kickouts, if they've got more possession, you're going to struggle to beat them, because Donegal just don't give the bloody ball away. They just don't. They're as good a team to put the ball through the hands. So if they get it from primary possession, no, doesn't matter what area of the pitch, it's very hard to get it back off it. So it's going to end up in a score or a shot on goal. So Kerry will have to know there's going to be 20, 25 kickouts coming from Sean Patton. If we can get half of them, that's massive. And it's not only just getting the possession. Stats show, even in the old game and the new game, the most dangerous attacking position is to win an opposition's kickout. Why? Because when you get the ball, you look up, it's pretty much man on man in terms of the numbers in front of you immediately. And if you put the gas down and attack that position from the minute you get the ball, as Monaghan did, you can reap rewards. Okay, so I think Kerry will sort of say we have to sort of put a big press on that, because to get the ball, there's very few times in the game, because they can be guaranteed Donegal are going to put a press on the Kerry kickout, and they will get a good return on that. So if they sort of say, well, if we get maybe 50% of our own we have to be sort of targeting the same of the Donegal kick out. Otherwise, they're going to be operating at a deficit of possession, and they're immediately handing the initiative to Donegal, who are so good with the ball in hand. So they're going to have to look at what Monaghan done well, as good as any team this year in terms of putting a press on Patton, and try and replicate that, not just for 30 minutes. You got to push hard for the 70 minutes and then trust that you're going to get a good return off that, and then you can do real damage with it, because that's in those instances, that's when Clifford is, I wouldn't just say isolated, but at worst he's going to be one-on-one. And there's, for that glimpse before the Donegal players turn on their heels and clog the possession, you can get quick ball in and you can do damage. And that might be 10, 12 instances in the whole game, but like, as we know with Clifford and the Kerry players, they don't need a huge amount of opportunities in those instances to do damage. So I would say you'll definitely see Kerry put a very big press on the Donegal kick-out.
Just on that, Pat, right? It's probably natural to focus on Patton. But at the other end, you mentioned the three best kick-out exponents, and your own county man wasn't in that. So, like, will Donegal try and hammer the hammer with him a small bit there? Will they go after him in that respect?
I'll tell you this about Shane Ryan. Shane Ryan is a serious goalkeeper, and his kick out are just as good as the three boys I mentioned. And what I like about him, this year, he's been superb this year, outside of his shots saving, but his kick outs have been very, very impressive this year. And you think back last year against Armagh, dropped the ball against Armagh, probably cost Kerry a place in the final, right? You fast forward to this year, in the quarter-final against Armagh, Jesus, he leaves a kick-out shot, it's turned over, and Armagh scored the goal. And what he showed from there on in was unbelievable character. Not only did he make some very impressive saves, but his kick-outs were bang on the money. And that's a sign of a great goalkeeper. That's a sign of a fellow with a great character that is, it showed great resolve. So yes, I don't have any fears about Ryan and his kick out. Absolutely none at all.
I would challenge his range of kicking is not anywhere near Sean Patton in terms of the distance and the speed at which he can get the ball from the tee to that distance. He's not at Sean Patton's level.
Agreed.
Why he was so good, especially in the second half against Armagh. And it wasn't as much to do with him, it was the movement of the Kerry players. Those players make themselves available. And if they don't work hard and run hard, as I say, those hard runs to get that wee bit of separation to give Ryan the opportunity to get it out, Donegal or will suffocate Kerry. So it has to be twofold. It has to be Ryan been on the money, confident in his kick, but the Kerry defence are going to have to work extremely hard to get that separation and give him the opportunity. Otherwise, just goes out over the top and then it's a lottery, Yeah.
Just a left field one for you, Pat, and it's nothing really to do with Sunday, but Kieran Donaghy leaving Armagh. Am I wrong to join dots and think what could be in 4 or 5 weeks?
Okay, Jack hasn't made his feelings known, but I have a gut feeling that Jack will pack it in.
To be fair, he actually told Colin Keys from our own parish here, he basically said that win, lose or draw in February, he said that this would more than likely be his last year.
I would think so. And like I said, the manoeuvrings have been going on for weeks. And sadly, the wagons were being settled. The vultures were up in the air. And unfortunately, the Armagh performance put pay to that. So the vultures have had to come down again. They're not settling anymore. So yeah, I mean, he'll be in the equation. Eamon Fitzmaurice will be in the equation. Tomas O'Shea is a name being thrown into the hat. Peter Keane will feel he has unfinished business back in Kerry and deserves a second chance. So there's a lot of manoeuvrings. Kieran, the two things that I know about Kieran. Well, first of all, anyone who's met Kieran knows he's a brilliant people person. He's an unbelievably enthusiastic, great motivator. But the lads in Armagh tell me, as a forwards coach, as a coach, he was outstanding as well. So he will be a brilliant look. Every county will be looking for him, and hopefully he'll be with Kerry in some part. Because nowadays, as you know, it's not just the one player.
Oh yeah, totally.
Liam Cahill surrounded himself with not alone Mikey Bevans, but Carl Sheridan as performance coach, and
David Herity, Paul O'Brien. Like the amount of expertise in these setups is down to layers upon layers of expertise.
The manager is only now the CEO or the chairman. I think the key is to assemble sharp coaches, and whatever manager will come in, Donny would have to be one of those coaches that has to be on any team, because he's a brilliant guy, good guy, and a good coach.
From a managerial point of view, if Kerry did appoint Donaghy, it would be very outside the box from what they have traditionally done. What they traditionally do is somebody who's in the system as maybe minor, under 20, etc. Fitzmaurice has gone out of that system, but obviously he was in that. Jack O'Connor was minor, under 21 manager. So it would be a departure if Donaghy was manager. So I get the feeling, I can see Fitzmaurice returning as banished with Donaghy as coach ticket. That's what I'm looking at, I think.
It wouldn't be, would it be my choice? Oh, absolutely, because Fitzmaurice, sharp brain, one of the most astute footballing brains in GAA. Fitzmaurice, Kieran Donaghy with other coaches, that would be your dream package, yes. But no, we're not packaged.
If Fitzmaurice gets back into management, and between Michael Murphy and Malachy O'Rourke, there'll be a prime time expose on the conspiracy of that football review.
I know.
Setting the rules up for themselves to all come back into the game.
I met Jack. I met Jack after the semi-final when they were getting on the bus, to congratulate him, because my nephew Killian was there as well, and there was a few of them, and I slagged him off over something. He said, "You're a hard man to fucking keep happy." But he shook my hand and he was happy that day. But look, Jack owes nothing to. This is his 8th All-Ireland final. He's won 4. That is some track record. So he can leave with his head held high, as he owes nothing to Kerry football. A brilliant manager.
Pat,
it is from an outsider looking in. For whatever reason, down in Kerry, he has his admirers, and he has his haters, or what you call it. Yeah. But when you think what he's done in terms of his CV, and you mention it going back into minors and his various terms. He's up there with the best of them in terms of managers, and you can't take that away from him. And if for nothing else, we're all talking about David Clifford, and it's the final that he deserves. It's the send off that Jack O'Connor deserves for Kerry, for his time served and what he's done for Kerry football. And if nothing more than that, he deserved the win on Sunday.
If it is a farewell for Jack O'Connor, Pat, will it be a happy farewell? How do you see this going? Give me predicted scoreline and a man of the match prediction as well.
Like I said, an All-Ireland final can take on a life of its own. There'll be so many twists and turns. The heroes, like I said, at 3:30 could be villains at 5 o'clock. There could be unsung heroes. There's 2 things I'm looking for. I'm giving a hesitant vote to Kerry, and I'm giving it on 2 reasons. I think they're coming to the bile at the right time. They've had 2 tough matches, quarter-final and semi-final, Armagh, Tyrone, 2 Division 1 outfits. And I said before about semi-finals. Semi-finals about winning, but they're also about, you always hate, Jesus, I always felt if I played brilliant in the semi-final, or we played brilliant as a team in the semi-final, that Jesus, there was no more improvement to do for a final. You always love to play okay in the semi-final, and that the big game was in the final.
The hurling semi-finals showed that, actually, yeah.
Cork had a cruise. Donegal had a cruise. Kerry had a tough game for long spells against Tyrone, and that will stand them number 1. But you know what could be we're again back to the grain of rice. Weather, the weather, and I think the weather will have a huge role. A wet, windy day will suit Donegal's possession football. A dry, calm day will suit Kerry's kicking game.
We're all jumping onto the weather app now.
I'm doing it as we speak, lads.
I know, I am.
There's no need, Michael, because next Sunday morning...
Pat, you've done your research. What's it going to give?
Next Sunday morning, I will be putting the Child of Prague outside the door, which means that all gone well. If the Child of Prague works, it's a dry day.
It's given a nice day, yeah, it is. If you can believe Matt Aaron.
Well, it was the bull rain last Sunday for the hurling, and it never materialised. The bull rained yesterday, all right, but it didn't happen on Sunday. The weather had very little effect. So, Pat, just give me a possible man of the match or a bolter.
Oh, geez.
Like Willie Connors was the bolter in the hurling final. Some people were wondering whether he would start or not. Who do you think that could be in the football?
A bolter. Paul Gainey, if he gets back to full fitness, was a revelation early in the year. Paul Gainey could be the bolter for a man of the match. And if not, from the defence, Gavin White, who's been superb all year.
Okay, Dick?
Paul Gainey. You were sitting with Brawley too long. You mightn't even play, Pat, for God's sake.
Gainey. I think he might.
He might get a bit. Okay, right. Listen,
I think he might be starting.
He could play a role. Listen, we could sit here for a week and we'd be no further on in terms of how the game's going to go. I think, look at form, look at experience, marginal tip of the hat to Kerry. Okay, the reality is Donegal, for all the Murphy McGuinness effect, they're inexperienced at this level, whereas the Kerry players have played in and won All-Ireland finals. And as we talked about at the start of the match, there is no predicting how players will respond to that day. You don't know. So we don't know will the Donegal players respond in the same way as they have done in Clonus and provincial venues and semi-finals. Will the occasion get to them? It may not, but it might. So Kerry have that. They've been there, they've done that, they've wore the T-shirt and they've come out the other side. I touched on this a couple of weeks ago. I think Kerry's Croke Park matches are worth more than what Donegal did in terms of the teams they beat and the manner in which they beat them. So the form line from the quarterfinals on is marginally in favour of Kerry as well. But listen, as we've seen in the hurling final, like it's going to come down to more than likely a couple of points. And you look at that Tipperary goal, the ball bouncing off the, coming back out, and I would have thought a fortuitous penalty as well. The referee's going to have a big bear, I think, on the match in terms of big calls. I think there will be a few big calls possibly that, depending on what way they fall, could have a massive bearing on the match. I don't think any side deserves it more than the other. I think both sides have been fantastic. Management teams, the way they've prepared, the way they've embraced the new rules, and insofar as how they've enthralled the crowds this year, and like you've had the best football championship ever, and it's fitting that the two best teams are there to finish it off. So whoever wins, people would have said to me, I'm anti Donegal. I'm absolutely.
You're anti everybody. We're giving out about Cork. You were giving out about Meath.
I can just picture the scenario now. All the listeners to this podcast, they've just heard Clerkin and Spillane back Kerry, so they're all going off saying they're definitely backing Donegal. Donegal are certainties because those two fellas couldn't pick their nose. Honest to God.
So a very, very marginal tip to Kerry, but with no great authority. Certainly wouldn't be putting a penny of my own money on it. You're asking for man of the matches. I think with all the focus on Clifford, it could very easily be like fall to Seanie O'Shea, who will just get maybe a wee bit of looser ball, and he could cut loose again. I think because they can't. I don't think they can lock everybody down, and if the play opens up a wee bit outside of Clifford, that's where Seanie O'Shea can pop up and just sort of do damage from inside or outside the arc. So could be a game for him. Jim O'Connor, interesting, right? I've grown to really like Kieran O'Connor as a player over the last number of years. If you remember, he came from playing junior football with Kerry. He was sort of this big, lanky lad. You weren't too sure had he got what it takes to be a midfielder for Kerry. He's got bigger, he got stronger. He was a miss. They've done without him. They can get him back in. I don't think they'll start him. The only thing is, if his shoulder is a suspect, are you better to start him and see how far he goes and then pull him off, as opposed to bring him on and it still goes and you've wasted the sub. So how they deploy him could be, because he should be fresh. He should have the legs, because I'd imagine he's been able to train and run. It's just contact has been the issue over the last number of weeks. So he could be a surprise package. Maybe not to get a man of the match, but he's more chance of a man of the match than Paul Gainey, who have an impact, but might be only 10, 15 minutes at the end.
I think Pat might know something a bit more than we do. Potentially.
The inside lane. I'm in the dark this year.
Like I said, you'll get to know the third secret of Fatima quicker than what's happening in Kerry training. Not a clue. Not a clue. Anyway, I might be here next Tuesday for the podcast, but maybe I might not. We'll see.
Hopefully it's roses, and hopefully it's roses again, not lilies, Pat.
Yeah.
After two kind of underwhelming enough semi-finals, hopefully we will get the final of all finals to cap. Listen, lads, what has been the best footballing season probably in living memory. We'll be back again next week to digest it all. Pat and Dick, thanks a million. We'll talk to you soon.